Welcome to day 2. Thank you so much for showing up. We're a little late. I guess we will have more people coming in, but I really appreciate you coming to day 2 this morning. Hope you're having your coffee, enjoying the networking. We're going to start the program right now, and I would also like to thank our diamond sponsors, Bitforex and Rakis Ventures, for helping us put in this event together. And
Qureshi.
And I would like to introduce you the amazing MC for day 2, Gordon Einstein. Gordon, please.
Good morning.
He will help me today on stage and mostly be your amazing master of ceremonies today. Gordon.
Let's give a round. No, hold on. Let's give a round for Olga and the whole AV organizing crew. Everyone. Raise your hand if you had your coffee. No one? Raise your hand if you're awake. Raise your hand if you're not awake. And raise your hand if you're not going to raise your hand no matter what I say. There's always someone. Got it. Okay, I'm going to endeavor to bring some high energy to this early morning. I think everyone was out the past couple days having a good time, but we will make it all happen. First up, we have a fantastic panel. The topic is carbon credits and Web 3.0, creating new opportunities and addressing climate change. Our moderator is Shafeeq Qureshi, founder of Sollix Consulting. Shafeeq, please come on board. Big round of applause. I promised you a high energy introduction, so welcome. And you'll introduce your co-panelists.
Hi,
and it's all yours.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this session of the MetaWeek. My name is Shafeeq Qureshi, and I'm the founder at Sollix Consulting, which is an advisory and consulting firm based out of Abu Dhabi, focusing on the Web3 and blockchain technologies. In the past, I've worked within the financial markets, trading and technologies, and have dealt with the carbon space briefly. And I'm very excited to have a very excellent set of panelists here with Dr. Jane Thomason, who is the Industry Associate, University College London, Centre for Blockchain, London, co-founder, British Blockchain and Frontier Technology Association, UK. We have Erin Grover with us, who's the Program Director of Regen Foundation. Gaurav Somwanshi, he's the CEO of Emertech, which is a blockchain-based company working with farmers in India and trying to extend their reach globally now. So, as Gordon already mentioned, today's session is about carbon credits and Web3, creating new opportunities and addressing climate change. I'm sure a lot of us have heard about climate change, and it is a very important topic for most of us here. And as I said, we are very fortunate to have an excellent set of panelists here who are industry specialists within their space and have worked on the grassroots. So in this session, for the next 35 to 40 minutes, we will be looking at various aspects of how the convergence of the Web3 space with the world of carbon credits can help in tackling climate change, which is a very crucial topic that we cannot ignore. I'm sure I'm passionate about it, and a lot of you are as well. What are the challenges and opportunities for the various stakeholders, especially the small players, the farmers and indigenous communities in developing countries, and the public at large to participate in this space with the help of Web3 technologies? So I don't know how many of you really know about carbon credits. If you could raise your hands, that would be great. Okay, I see like a few hands there. So basically, carbon credits are a scheme that was started as part of the Kyoto Protocol in 1997, if I'm not mistaken. And obviously, you can comment more on that. So as part of the scheme, it incentivizes governments and stakeholders and companies to reduce their carbon footprint. And also, it rewards other stakeholders to give them credits for anything that is beneficial for the environment. So if they're doing any kind of reforestation initiatives or, they're building green energy facilities, so you get rewards for that. And as a consequence of that, it has emerged into a trading scheme, which is part of one of the schemes of this initiative, which was part of the Kyoto Protocol. So there is like the compliance side and there is the voluntary side. And this space has been there for the last 15 to 20 years, but it has had its problems with a lot of bureaucracy in the system and the system's not being very efficient. So what we're going to be focusing on is how the space of Web3, and as we know, blockchain and Web3 is one of the solutions that we're looking at to democratize and basically make it a lot more easier for the systems and solutions in the present markets to improve. So we are going to look at all of that. And before we start the discussion, I'd like you all to introduce yourself. Let's start from you, Gaurav. So if you could just quickly introduce yourselves, and then we'll jump into the discussions and the questions.
Thank you, Shafeeq, and thank you everyone for coming here. I'm Gaurav Somwanshi, and I'm a part of Emertech Innovations, a startup which began primarily by working with small landholding farmers of India, not directly, but with farmer collectives. It's an idea that I will speak about in detail as we go ahead. So we provide end-to-end traceability. So far, we've printed more than 5.2 million QR codes on fruits and vegetables, as well as over 45,000 QR codes on T-shirts, which show you exactly how much additional income the farmer is earning throughout the value chain. You can purchase the T-shirts directly from the farmer collectives also. I'll talk about that later. So yeah, thank you.
Hi, my name is Erin Grover. I have been in blockchain for about 6 years. I started out in crypto assets and crypto funds, and then have transitioned into supply chain on blockchain, and actually got to do some work with Gaurav over the past year for that with produce supply chain. And being in produce supply chain with blockchain made me think a year ago it's probably good to start thinking about carbon assets from farmers who are using these blockchain applications, and that's what we're doing today is getting some farmers onto blockchain for the rewarding of their carbon assets.
So hi, my name's Jane Thomason. I started getting involved in blockchain in 2016, and the reason that I was interested in it was for its social utility, for the things that it can actually do for people. And two things happened to me in 2017 that I want to tell you about. One is that I was approached to write a chapter in a book on blockchain, climate finance, and green energy. So that's when I started thinking about blockchain and climate. And then the second one was I actually met Gaurav over LinkedIn, and he sent me this message, said, I'm in the state of Chhattisgarh and we're trying to think about how to use mobile phones for the nomadic populations in Chhattisgarh. And so we had a number of interactions, and then I went and met him in Chhattisgarh. This guy is a legend, so if you don't have a chance to hear everything he's got to say on the panel, go see him later. But just last point is that we're in the UAE. Next year, UAE has the presidency of the COP, the biggest climate conference in the world. So getting interest and focus on blockchain and climate change is really timely for the UAE.
Thanks for your introductions. And before we jump into the question and answer sessions, I would like to mention one more very important thing here, that Dr. Thomason and Erin are also part of the World Economic Forum's Crypto Sustainability Coalition, which is one of the 3 working groups on carbon credits with a mission to investigate how blockchain and Web3 tools can be leveraged to achieve positive climate change. So I think we are very lucky to have them, and obviously Gaurav with his experience at the grassroots level. So my first question is going to be addressed to you, Jane. Is it okay if I call you Jane?
Please, feel free.
So how do carbon credits come in the picture of the Web3 and blockchain space? What I'd like to understand, and also for the sake of the audience, I think they would like to know that too. We know there is, the carbon credits aspect of things, and there is the blockchain. Obviously, they both have been talked about with their merits. So how can the convergence of carbon credits and Web3 help with tackling climate change, which is the big issue?
So what I want to do is just take a little bit of a step back, remembering that Web3 is the internet of value. So it allows the exchange of value well, that's not Mark Zuckerberg's metaverse, by the way, but Web3, open, democratised, and allows the exchange of value. And so there's a tremendous amount of opportunity in relation to climate change, not just for carbon. So I want to just run through them really quickly because I don't want to dominate the panel. But if I leave you with nothing else, I want you to understand that this is really a significant opportunity. So the first one's about transparency and traceability in climate finance, because the flows of climate finance are very opaque and are very clunky, and this would allow improved efficiency, transparency and traceability. The second one is there's a whole range of what we're calling green digital assets that are relevant to climate change, from green utility tokens, green security tokens, actually green crypto, green blockchains, because one of the things you'll hear usually shouted out in a conference like this is there's a big energy footprint of blockchain. So there's the Bitcoin and Ethereum are working on trying to change that, and B, you've got all of these new chains like Algorand, Solana, Celo, and others that are now green blockchains that you can build on without creating a huge energy footprint. So the third one is smart grid management. So this allows, like the Brooklyn microgrid and Power Ledger, allows energy trading off-grid. And this is also super helpful for poor farmers in developing countries because they can buy a small solar panel and they can sell small amounts of energy to other people in the village to charge their mobile phone or to charge a solar light, for example. And so that they're calling this is the prosumer generation. They can actually make money out of the green energy. The next point that I want to make is around verification and measurement and reporting, and we're going to talk about that in relation to carbon offsets and carbon credits because this is super important. Then to NFTs. NFTs are going to be tremendously important in the future of addressing climate change, both as the verification, if you like, of the certificates, for example, NFTs that represent carbon offsets, but also projects like Art for Climate, where people are making NFTs to be able to raise money for climate change.
I have another question for NFTs in the metaverse.
Yeah, and I'm trying to be really fast because I want you to know there's a lot. The gamification allowing people to play, to take climate action, and finally, there's a global coalition that I'm part of that are developing a DAO for climate action. Sorry, I know it's too long.
Thank you, Jane. Obviously, I think you mentioned issues about transparency and traceability, which I think have been one of the concerns within the space of the credit, carbon credits and the whole emissions trading scene, I believe. So that's, I think, the point we're taking from here. Regarding the NFTs and the metaverse, I think I have another question, so we can touch that subject later on. I'm sure a lot of the audience are interested in that as well. My next question is for you, Erin. Do you think that Web3 can democratize the access to sustainable solutions such as participation in carbon credits, create that at a larger scale, which means giving access to smaller players, whether through tokenization or other means?
Absolutely. So there is an interesting company coming up right now called Reseed that is actually working to put phone apps in the hands of smallholder farmers around the world so they can easily register their blockchain native carbon credits and to sell them on the global marketplace. This hasn't happened before. So if you're talking about democratization, that's where it's at. In the past, over the past 30 years, the carbon markets have been active. It's usually been the wealthier landholders who've been able to monetize their carbon assets in the land. So with this technology, with the blockchain, we can reach millions and billions over the next decade.
So you mean it's not just about trading as per this, for the sake of trading, it's also about, giving access to smaller farmers or smaller players and give them an opportunity.
Yes, and it's because the smallholder farmers are the ones who are keeping the carbon in the land because of their regenerative practices. Okay. There are about 1 billion smallholder farmers around the world, and they are the keepers of the carbon, which is so important right now because we have more carbon in the air than ever. So apparently the way we've been doing things in the carbon markets isn't working, but with Web3, we absolutely have the opportunity to change it.
Thanks. I think there will be some of those topics we'll touch again. but thanks for the answer. Now, my third question for you, Gaurav. Obviously, you've been working with the grassroots back in India, and I think you've had about 20,000 farmers on your platform that you're working with. And I know the issue of farmers in India has been a very sensitive one, where they've been dealing with immense challenges. I mean, I think for the lack of any better word, challenges is probably a very soft word. But I would like you to explain to us what are the challenges, the issues that farmers have been struggling with, and how are you trying to improve the lives of farmers specifically, because that is your focus, using Web3 and blockchain.
I'll just take 1 minute to go into the history of the question because it's important to give the context. In 1919 or 1918, a paper was written by the same person who wrote our Indian Constitution, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, in which he outlined, the title of the paper was Small Land Holding and Their Remedies. Now, way back in 1918, it was outlined that because of majority of our population is involved within agriculture, somehow we skipped the entire industrial revolution and directly became a service economy. So there is the manufacturing and production sector is pretty low in India. What happened was, because of that, the proportion of population involved in agriculture remained the same, while the income became drastically lower. And with every oncoming generation, because of heredity, your land is getting split into more and more smaller parcels. So today the average land holding is 1 to 3 acres only. And if you look at the Western counterparts, it is 100 times, 300 times the average land holding. Because of small land holding, another paper was written by the economist Professor N.D. Kamble called Bonded Labor in India. What happens is, it's a small land holding, I can't invest heavily capital into it, I can't buy tractors, I can't heavily go into fertilizers or pesticides which are going to help me to become export certified. Because of that, I will be taking loans from the local money lender, becoming dependent on the middlemen, and that is the whole cycle of the vicious cycle starts. To talk about some grim statistics, how it actually ends up in, from 1995 onwards till until we were recording the data till 2013, on an average there were 14,000 farmer suicides every year, and 3,000 of them were in my state alone, Maharashtra, the state where I belong to. So that comes to roughly around 10 farmer suicides per day. And it's primarily because some crops are associated with it. There are many other political scenarios also, but the primary reason is small landholding. Now, no technology can actually crack the problem of small landholding, but the farmers themselves are doing something. Farmers are coming together. Since past 11 years, primarily they are making new organizations called farmer producer companies, in which the farmers themselves are the stakeholders, owners and controllers of their activity. They run it like a private organization, and we work with farmer producer companies. So we incentivize the collectivization of farmers so that they could overcome the obstacles which cannot be solved if you're working in isolation. That is where we try to infuse in technology by giving them applications to manage their operations with more efficiency. It could be inventory management at cheap rates, HR management, traceability with blockchain. All of this would come when we try to focus upon those farmer groups. So what India needs, or every developing country needs, is adoption of technology while working together so that the bargaining power as well as the resilience to fight climate change could come up. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think so. Basically, the way the Indian economic scenario has transformed since you mentioned, since the 1990s, it kind of jumped to a service industry, and the agriculture sector and the farmers were neglected as a consequence of that. And that has led to all these problems and exploitation of farmers. And in your case, the solution that you have, you obviously explained that. I mean, how does it go about, solving that? You said you have farmer collectives that you work with, and the farmers are basically also incentivized because of the access to the platform and the use of technology.
Yes. So a farmer group is, you should not see it as a charity case, but as a business. If you are running a business, you're going to need every module to manage your staff, to manage your entire geolocations of the plot, to do agronomy, to do inventory management, to do marketing, to do labeling of products, to do logistics. All of that needs frugal innovation to come into place. And that is where we intend to focus upon, because only and only when these farmer-producer companies become profitable, that is when farmers will be incentivized to join more and more groups. And there are very strict rules within the farmer-producer company which ensures that they remain egalitarian. For example, let's say in one of the farmer collectives with 13,000 farmers, regardless of the land holding or shareholding patterns, everyone gets only one vote. So at the same time, if you are an external investor who is not a farmer in that region, you cannot become an investor in that farmer-producer company. So there are some regulations which came hardly less than just about a decade ago, which ensure that we learn from our past mistakes and overcome the problem of small landholdings using technology and better marketing tools.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned something which kind of gave me a sense of, a DAO or structure, decentralized organizations, as some of you already know. So do you have like a DAO structure there, decentralized autonomous organization structure?
DAO structure and philosophy was kind of implemented in 1959 by the largest. So 6 million farmers came together and began this dairy collective. And the whole idea was, so in the words of the founder, I'll quote him directly, where cooperation fails, there fails the hope of rural India. So they don't compete with each other. So for example, both of us are milk processing factories. I have oversupply of raw material, you have less supply. So I will not compete with you, I'll work alongside you. And they have been doing this formal negotiations way before even internet came into being. So how to formalize that as we go ahead? So DAO definitely has a future in this.
Thank you very much. That's very informative, and I think that's a very important aspect of the work. I mean, in general, with how Web3 technologies can tackle and actually really have an impact on the ground, especially when you talk about farmers and growers in developing countries. So that leads me to my next question. I think I'll address it to you, Erin, and then I'll come back to you, Jane. We've heard about different quality of carbon credits based on the source, and how, so there's like different quality of carbon credits which are generated. But I think there has been inefficiencies in that system where, you don't really know the source of the carbon credit and whether it is really reliable, number one, and also, whether it has been done with proper due diligence. So could you just talk about a little bit more about that and how the blockchain can actually improve it, either through traceability or other means?
Yes, so there are a couple of things going on here. One, a lot of carbon credits in the past and even currently are based on things like coal mines, right? And, there are a lot of practices that vary all around the carbon industry that don't really help the situation. For example, people will use reforestation projects just to fulfill their, carbon neutral quota and whatever they're doing, and then eventually when they're done, then they just cut down the trees anyway. So, but also what's interesting, what's happening right now with the one company that I mentioned, Reseed, is that they are using geotagging, which Gaurav is familiar with because that's what he does with blockchain for his farmers. But Reseed is using geotagging to show exactly where the carbon's coming from and that it actually exists, which is very important because that's the disruption, is showing that the carbon credits exist in real time and where they're from. As in, if I buy a carbon credit, I can go and look up the Google Earth coordinates and see where it is and see that it's actually on a farm. And you can easily see this. So this is the exciting innovation that's coming that will change the whole carbon industry.
Thanks. I think I would just again mention, so there are different types of carbon credits, right? And there are carbon credits that are derived from companies and corporations cutting down their carbon emissions output, and also from the voluntary measures that, such as reforestation or any renewables energy. And these are the different types of carbon credits we have. And that's why the source of them is very important, especially when you're trying to offset your carbon emissions, basically. Right. And you mentioned traceability there, and obviously, the origin of these carbon credits is important. But like, how did you say, like, so you said because of the blockchain, we can actually use that to ascertain the origin of these credits. Right, right.
Yeah, I mean, with blockchain, you can create incredible traceability and make these carbon assets, these carbon credits, blockchain native. So one of the challenges that we have even in the blockchain world right now is that a lot of carbon initiatives are essentially buying traditional carbon assets from the existing markets and then tokenizing them, but they're not showing the traceability of the actual asset. We in the blockchain industry who are leading this effort need to show that these assets are real and where they're coming from in real time, and that's where the change will happen.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Thanks for explaining that. There is also something else I've been hearing about, like, where you actually can generate credits for a project that does not even take place. Say, let's say there is a mining allocation given to a company, and or there is an oil exploration contract. There was an example of Greenland I was reading about where a certain company was given the rights to explore, and they basically generate credits, or they promise to generate credits on the basis that they will not go ahead and do the exploration. But a lot of times, I mean, do you have any of those examples? I mean, you can talk about it as well, Jane, or do you know any of those cases where you're actually generating credits for something that you're not doing?
That's actually very common. I mean, I think there's a lot of opaqueness in the carbon credit markets and how they're used and how they are or aren't verified, and how those verified. This is an intention. You have an intention to explore and then you don't explore, so you get carbon credits. So the whole market needs to be cleaned up, quite frankly. But the other point that I want to make that I think is really important for people to understand is that we in the rich countries create the emissions, and then we go buy these carbon credits from the poor countries, but we don't pay the people properly for it. And I think this is one of the key things that's going to be possible with blockchain and with gamification and with the exchange of value, to make sure what is the motivation for someone who owns a piece of the Amazon rainforest to keep that rainforest pristine? Nothing. The motivation that they have to be able to earn money and create a livelihood for their families is to either chop the trees down and sell the timber, or allow people to come and build plantations on their land. And so we have the possibility now with blockchain and with valuing carbon credits properly and paying people properly for carbon credits to allow them to retain their native lands, allow them to practice regenerative agriculture and be rewarded for doing that because it's a service to the planet. And I think that's what I'd love you guys to walk away and think about, because right now it's a very skewed market. We create the emissions and we don't pay the people who give us the carbon credits properly.
Thanks for explaining that, Jane. My other question is about, we're talking about carbon emissions and the carbon footprint, but at the same time, there has been criticism of the blockchains being very energy intensive when it comes to consuming energy, and they're not they haven't had the reputation of being really green. Of course, we're talking about moving from proof of stake to proof of work, or the other way. And with the Ethereum Forge happening, and also a lot of the other blockchains, they're looking at how they can make it more efficient in terms of energy consumption. There's also mining happening on renewables. So there's a lot of those initiatives. But what is is the inefficiency of energy consumption associated with some of these blockchain networks an inhibitor or a hurdle? Because if we, on one hand, are talking about how to make the planet cleaner and environmentally friendly, but at the same time we're saying we'll do it using blockchain. So that kind of sounds like a contradiction. I don't know. You can both comment on it, but
I'm happy to start with that because I do think, and you've all experienced it, this is the big club that people find to hit us over the head with if you're doing blockchain. They go, but it emits the amount that Iceland does or something. It's a much more nuanced discussion than that. That's the first point. And people are certainly working. Bitcoin miners are moving to renewable energy. Ethereum's about to bring out its new version that's not going to be so energy intensive. And we've got the green blockchains. But digitalisation creates an energy footprint and an emissions footprint, and it's huge, and it's not just from blockchain. So I think we need to be much more clever at telling the stories, but we also need to be aware, because I had an example of a startup that I'm working with. They want to be green. They want to issue a green NFT collection, but they're terrified because although OpenSea's had a few problems lately, the big NFT markets are all on Ethereum. So they were having a kind of mental, conundrum about wanting to mint on a green blockchain, but there being no liquidity with those blockchains. So we're in a period where things are in transition.
Thanks. Erin, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, and I agree with everything Jane is saying, and I know it's a very nuanced conversation. It's not black and white. I will say I was in America in 2017 as crypto was on the rise, and I am aware that there were a number of journalists who were actually paid off by certain companies and parties to say that blockchain is dirty, to scare people who are more progressive and forward-thinking to not buy blockchain or not buy crypto. And guess what? It worked. So the thing is, you have to look at traditional banking. That's dirty too. The ink, the printing of money, the endless printing of money, the infrastructure, the brick and mortar, that's dirty too. And at least the real crypto that will probably last for a very long time, that's all finite.
And I think also within the blockchain and the crypto space, we're still very early and we're still evolving. So I think it's just the beginning, and the future is not necessarily going to be determined how it is now. And we already see a lot of work being done on that to make it more efficient. Thanks for that. That's quite informative. Gaurav, so we've been talking about carbon and carbon credits and all. Obviously, your solution, the platform you has, it's about traceability, giving access to farmers, and making their lives easier. But what about carbon credits? And is that part of your equation in any way? Is that something that you're looking at?
Oh, yes, definitely, because those are the conversations we are having with Reseed itself. But to talk about India, to give example of another startup which did it successfully just a couple of months ago. So Delhi, our capital, is the most polluted city, right? 40% of that pollution comes because traditionally farmers in the surrounding region have been burning thousands and thousands of tons of agricultural waste because for them it is the cheapest way to dispose it. Despite a lot of regulations to come and stop it, a lot of, you could say, many attempts have been made by NGOs to put a hold to it, but it doesn't stop. Then this startup comes a couple of months ago and they have this incentive and an enzyme through which they also tell them that if you use this enzyme, it will use for biodegradation. At the same time, the very act of not burning it, which you've been doing for decades and decades, will ensure that we will be counting your carbon credits. So they measured around 20,000 carbon credits and sold them in voluntary markets. I think the name of the startup was nurture.farm. Now that is just the beginning, if that is how it's going to happen. The way that we are also trying to focus upon the same aspects is, since we are capturing data in any case for traceability, if we could just add more parameters to it, which makes it eligible for entering into voluntary carbon markets, which is something Reseed has already been doing way before that, then that is the exact kind of innovation or financial incentives that the farmers needs. Because then you will be putting in, that is the money flow that we always talk about, right? The people who are suffering the brunt of the climate change, at the same time who are also doing the most to stop the climate change, which are the small landholding farmers. If they could be given a way to get financially incentivized to do it, then that is definitely the biggest point on the agenda now.
So basically, it would be an additional, a bonus incentive for the farmers to be generating carbon credits out of the work they're doing. That would be one way. Yeah. I've also, read about but, one of the problems in India has been that a lot of farmers, after the crop is cut, they burn the remains, the remnants, and that causes a lot of pollution, obviously. And I think there have been some initiatives where you actually reward the farmers for not burning it, and they get carbon credits as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
The same one. And at the same time, you also ensure that, blockchain alone, carbon credits alone doesn't solve it. The another innovation that helped there was the invention of this particular chemical, which helped to biodegrade, to do degradation of that entire biomass in a way where the output is useful for the farmers for the next harvest while doing the farming. So a combination of all of these things, why to even bother to do the extra work? That is where the financial incentives play the most important role.
So basically, you end up generating, energy using methane, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. That's quite interesting. I'll go back to, I think, Erin. Is there any other case studies that you'd like to mention that are positively contributing towards building solutions for climate change using Web3? You mentioned one of them being the reseed one.
Yeah. Yes, the only case study that I'm aware of is through Reseed, and what they've done is they have purchased the carbon credits from a farm in Brazil, a smallholder farm in Brazil, and that farm on a yearly basis generates about 20,000 USD off of its own product, and then they paid the farm 20,000 USD for the year, for year one, for the carbon credits. And this is within the first 30 days the farmer gets paid, which is something that didn't happen in the past. With traditional markets, farmers were promised, you'll get paid 2-3 years down the line, and a lot of them never got paid.
So this is a case study in Brazil that was done?
This is a case study in Brazil, and any time that carbon credit gets traded, because it's tokenized and it will be publicly traded soon, the farmer gets a cut of every sale going into the future. And you can trace this, aside from if the asset is real or not or where it is, you can trace how much the farmer gets paid and that they actually got paid through the blockchain.
That's very interesting. So it's beyond just, the big players, and the farmers actually are getting incentivized, as we saw in your case and also the case study. Do you have, Jane, would you like to, do you have any other examples that you might want to share on this?
I do, but one of the comments that I want to make, because we haven't really touched on it, I don't think, is that the voluntary carbon markets don't really work properly. So the compliance markets, they're fixed, they're set, people have to offset certain amounts of their emissions, and the price is set. In the voluntary markets, the price is not set. So in the European ETS at the moment, maybe the price is $100 for a tonne of carbon. In the voluntary markets, it can be as little as $2 or $3. So this is, again, this discrepancy that I spoke to you about. But I've been working with the Universal Carbon Registry in India, which is the biggest carbon registry in India, and they're producing carbon credits, plastic credits and water credits and tokenising them. They're fully verified, by the way, but then making sure that, as Erin spoke, the reward is going back to the village people who ultimately produce these credits. So I think there is hope both to improve the verification, traceability, transparency of the way we're dealing credits. There's opportunity to reward the people who produce them, but we do need to fix the markets because they're not getting a fair reward at the moment.
So you mentioned, you want to say
Well, I just wanted to mention the palpable story of the rewarding of these farming practices too. When this owner of the farm in Brazil was paid, she said, "Oh my God, now I feel like I can keep the family farm and I don't have to sell my farmland to the corporates." So, that's where we're trying to get.
Yeah, because a lot of times these farmers in these developing countries, they're under debt, they're under a lot of stress, so a lot of times they end up selling their family-owned possessions and end up with nothing. So yeah, I think that's definitely very, very helpful. The point you touched earlier, Jane, just now, you were talking about, I think there is a pricing discrepancy that you mentioned between different types of carbon credits, right? So you mentioned the ETS, which is the European Trading Scheme, and then there is the other markets in the developing countries. So would you like to just explain a little bit more about, what causes that discrepancy? Why is it that the same thing in one market is so differently priced than in another market?
I don't want to go into too much detail because I can see we're running out of time, but I think the important thing that people need to understand is there's a massive discrepancy and the voluntary markets don't work. So sometimes there's a lot of hype in blockchain at the moment about tokenising the carbon credits and the carbon offsets and how we're going to save the planet and the universe and everything else. We need to be very realistic that there's still some market failures that are going to prevent that working properly. So I think that's really the takeaway, not the detail of why one's worth more or less than another.
Thank you. Just before we go ahead, Gordon, are we still okay with the time? 30
more seconds.
Oh, seriously? And we'll have some Q&A? Possibly? All right, thank you. Thank you very much. I do have a few more questions. I think this is such an exciting topic. I'm passionate about it. I'm sure a lot of you are passionate about it. We can keep on going on and on with this discussion, but as Gordon just reminded me, we are running out of time. I'm not sure if we'd have any time for Q&As, but
Can I make one more point?
Yes, please.
Anyone who's interested in this, we've got a hackathon coming up on the weekend of the 24th and 25th of this month at the Youth Hub at Emirates Towers. If you want to come and think about blockchain for sustainability, come and either be in the hackathon or be a mentor for the hackathon. And if you're interested, come and talk to me.
Thank you very much. It's great to have you here, and thanks for the audience listening patiently to us. If you have any questions, please find us around, and we'd be happy to answer them. I'm sure Jane and Erin and Gaurav would be very happy to interact with you and connect with you. You have a lovely day, and I'll. All right. We do a picture together.